Okay. So I'm going to talk this morning about a practice that I've taken up over the last couple of years that's called forest bathing. And it's a way of being in nature and developing a relationship with nature, or as the forest bathing, I guess, teaching frames it as the more than human world. The more than human world. So there's not nature and us, but there's the more than human world of which we are a part. So I think I'll begin with just like a typical introduction in a forest bathing practice is to begin with acknowledging the First Nations of this land, which were the Kalapuya, and there's evidence of their living here as long as probably almost 14,000 years ago. I've only been in Eugene for 30 years. So puts a little bit in perspective. The Kalapuya were many, many different sub-tribes that inhabited this land from as far north as what is now Tualatin to as far south as Yankala. They had slightly different languages and customs, but they've all been here for a long time, and many of them, of course, still exist as part of a larger confederation of the Grand Ronde tribes, which is based in Pendleton, I think. So we want to acknowledge their presence here on this land. Every time I say that, I wonder, like, who sat here in this very spot 13,000 years ago? Like, what was here? It's always something that comes to my mind. I think I'll go on by saying, like many of us, I've enjoyed outdoor activities for most of my life. My first backpack trip was at 19 in the Sawtooth Mountains of Idaho. So that's a very strong memory in my heart. It was just me and one other person that I didn't even know. It was very strange, but anyway, it was beautiful. And I continue to enjoy the outdoors, mostly canoeing, kayaking, and backpacking. But what I struggle with, especially as I've gotten older and as I spend more time outside, is kind of the sporty nature, for lack of a better phrase, or the competitiveness of it. Having to go to the fastest river or the biggest rapids. Those things aren't bad. Or they're getting to the top of the mountain in a short amount of time as possible, those kinds of things. I just don't resonate with that so much. I mean, I'm more of a meditative paddler, for example. People around here will diss Fern Ridge, but I actually think Fern Ridge is lovely. It's a lovely paddle, especially if you go in the morning or late in the evening when the birds are out. It's lovely. And also, I've grown increasingly unable to have just sort of general chit chat while I'm outside in nature, just like talking about stuff other than where we are. I love the group that I paddle and backpack with, but they love to talk about gear. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about gear. I just don't want to talk about gear, especially when I'm out in nature. I don't want to talk about it. So, again, it's just me. It's not bad. And I just do the best I can with it. But my time in the wilderness is not the time for those things. And not to mention that I'm an introvert by nature, and which has been nurtured and supported by my many years of Zen practice. So I'm completely comfortable walking or paddling in silence. It is not a big deal. In fact, I tend to pull back from the group a lot of the time and walk by myself. I'll get to what is forest bathing in a minute, but I wanted to also talk about my inspirations. So aside from my own psychological makeup, there's a couple of things that I want to mention that are important to me. And one, I really recommend this. There's a really good podcast called BBC Earth. If you've never listened to it, I highly recommend it. They're short episodes about various aspects of the more than human world. It's a real wide variety. But one of the things that really caught my attention was a story of a woman whose husband had died suddenly. And she went through many years of, or several years anyway, of grief counseling and all this kind of stuff. And where she found her healing was in mushroom hunting and learning about fungi and learning about that whole world. And I just, and so the mushrooms became her therapist, if you will. And that really touched me. It was so beautiful. And now you have to listen to the story to really appreciate it. I mean, I can put it somewhere. I'd have to dig through the BBC Earth list to find it. But it was really, really beautiful. So I'm not to say that she was completely healed or that therapy is a bad thing, but just that she found her way through working with mushrooms. Another inspiration, which is something I'm taking to practice, is Dogen's Mountains and Waters Sutra. And there's 3 sort of sections of it that really speak to me in terms of the forest bathing practice. And Dogen writes, this is near the beginning of the writing. Mountains walking is just like human walking. Accordingly, do not doubt mountains walking, even though it does not look the same as human walking. The Buddha ancestors' words point to walking. This is fundamental understanding. You should penetrate these words. Because green mountains walk, they are permanent. Although they walk more swiftly than the wind, someone in the mountains does not realize or understand it. In the mountains means the blossoming of the entire world. People outside the mountains do not realize or understand the mountains walking. Those without eyes to see mountains cannot realize, understand, see, or hear this as it is. If you doubt mountains walking, you do not know your own walking. It is not that you do not walk, but that you do not know or understand your own walking. Since you do know your own walking, you should fully know the green mountains walking. So I'm not saying that I understand this, and I really don't think that Dogen is asking us to understand it with the front part of the brain, with the logical reasoning part of the brain. And I certainly can't presume to understand exactly what Dogen was saying, but I really think what he's inviting us into is the imaginal realm, which, as one definition, would be a liminal space which hovers between the visible and the invisible, between the spiritual and the material worlds. He's not asking us to, I'd say, to explore mountains walking and do this through your own walking. And whatever that ends up meaning is what it ends up meaning. But our brains want to latch on. They want to label. They want to name, and they want to make sense, and then move on to the next thing. And I think to me, this passage speaks of not doing that. So this is exactly what forest bathing is inviting us to do: is to enter the more than human world in a liminal way, in an explorative way, and not as an experience, not as a check-off list. What are the people that do the ones who the people who capture peaks? I forget what that's called. It's not something I do, but peak bagging. Yes, it's not about that stuff. It's not a bad thing. If you enjoy it, you love it, that's great. I'm not dissing peak bagging at all. But it's what we do. We want to capture and own. There's been a lot of since COVID, a lot more people have been going into the outdoors and going to so-called, less populated places than posting on Instagram, and then everybody's like, and so it's very strange, and I'm not trying to be elitist about it and say that nobody can do that, but it's just, it's what we do as humans, and forest bathing is asking us to take a step back from that and not do that. And not that you can't do it too, but I don't do Instagram. I'm just reading about these things, but yeah. So, and finally, I'm really, and I guess I'm just going to say, like everybody else, I'm deeply concerned about climate change and the human relationship to the more than human world that is dominant in most of the world. And I feel really overwhelmed and powerless in the face of it. I really do. I don't know anybody who really doesn't. And so I think that my little drop in, my little role in maybe helping to reverse this, maybe not in my lifetime or in my granddaughter's lifetime, is maybe to start to shift how we see the more than human world and what our relationship is to it. So forest bathing is a practice Sai has been on a walk with me, and Reiko's been on a walk with me. Did you join a walk? I just can't remember, but can't remember faces with masks. I'm so sorry. And Linda's been on a walk. Oh my gosh, there's 4 of you who've been here on a walk. So yes, thank you for remembering. Um, it's a practice. It's not a hike. We don't walk very fast or walk very far. It's not about burning calories or bagging photos or anything like that. Although you can do that if you really want to, but it's a practice. And what I thought I would do is to guide us through the opening meditation that we always offer at the start of a forest bath. And I hope that this gives you a sense of where this is going. I don't want to do the whole thing because then that wouldn't be fair, because a forest walk actually takes about 3 hours. So it's not fast. So I'm just going to do what's called pleasures of presence. This is the opening meditation for forest walk. So first I invite you to do what we do in Zazen. So maybe to take just a few slow, deep breaths to just ground yourself in this space. And I'm not asking you to sit completely still. A big part of this practice is listening to our bodies and grounding ourselves in our bodies and in our senses. Again, taking another deep breath, I just invite you to look around and just notice where we are, taking in as much as you can through all your senses. Grounding your attention in your body, wherever you feel most called to. I wonder, what is it like to be in your body right now? If your body is asking you for something, maybe a little stretch, a little massage, just go ahead and give your body whatever it is asking for. Just really noticing the shape of your body in this moment. What does it feel like to sit this way? How do you experience the shape of your body in this moment? Perhaps gently shifting your weight from side to side, front to back. What does that feel like in your body? If you feel comfortable, just consider closing your eyes. We rely so much on the sense of sight. Closing the eyes can help to awaken our other senses, but only if you feel comfortable. And just hold a soft gaze as we do in Zazen. Feeling your breath moving through your body naturally without any effort. And begin to turn your attention to your hearing, towards sound. What sound feels furthest away from your body? What sound feels the closest? What is the quietest sound that you can hear? Perhaps there's a rhythm or a melody to this place right now. As you listen, I wonder what might be listening to you, hearing your breath, hearing your heartbeat, hearing the gentle movement of your body. Again, taking a deep breath, focusing on the sense of smell. What do you smell? Maybe there's some nuance in that fragrance with each breath. The senses of taste and smell are closely connected. I wonder about the taste of the air in this room. You might try breathing in as if you were sipping the air through a straw. Turning our attention to the senses of touch and texture. I wonder what differences we notice between the skin exposed to the air and the skin underneath our clothing. If you hold your hands out, can you feel the movement of the air in this room? I wonder what that feels like for you. Perhaps bringing your hands together. Does it feel like when skin touches skin? Pressing your hands into a gasho, what does that feel like? Grounding your attention in the lower part of your body, perhaps imagine roots coming out and sinking down into the earth. As your roots go deeper, I wonder what they might encounter. What are we sitting on top of right now, hidden from our vision, hidden from our senses? Wonder what it would be like to be rooted in this very spot, like a tree, roots deep into the earth. What would it feel like to be the wind, to be water, to be stones? I wonder what the birds see as they fly around us in this little zendo. What might they be talking about? Do they see us? If you'd like, place your hand on your heart. Oops. Taking a deep breath, feeling your heartbeat. I wonder what it feels like to have your heart. I wonder what your heart is yearning for. And when you feel ready, you can just sort of flutter open your eyes, look around. And just let your gaze rest to some spot that you feel drawn to. Just being present with what is. So one of my favorite phrases from the Forest Bathing Lexicon is notice what you're noticing. Notice what your mind and your body are drawn to. So, for example, the brain, the mind has a negativity bias. So there's like you think about zazen or during long retreat, body pain comes up a lot. So that's what we're noticing a lot of the time. So it's very interesting to notice what you feed and what you pay attention to. So I'm going to take this time now for maybe some discussion and questions, and then I'll close with a poem in about 10 or so minutes. So if anybody has anything, what are you noticing? Maybe just put that question out there. What are you noticing? Anybody?
How the air flows past my face and head and surrounds me.
We're not looking for big complex things. Just looking for, yeah. How often do we take the time to notice that? Yeah, like somebody's having a somebody's having a moment out there. Crows and jays, they're pretty much involved in a moment most of the time. Yeah.
I notice how my body feels warm, but the air outside is really cool.
Yeah.
I also noticed that big ass bell.
All right. That big ass bell. Yes.
both familial and also Buddhist ancestors.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm wondering, with your time spent being very mindful in the forest, what you've noticed.
Well, there's a couple of things that's interesting about that. I think one is that from a scientific perspective, one of the things that forest bathing teaches is that humans essentially evolved with forests for the most part. I mean, I'm sure we had where there were forests, there were water. Where there were forests, there were food. The fact that if you read about the Kalapuya here, they depended very much on whatever plants grew. They helped cultivate some things, and the river for fish and so on. But an interesting thing about trees in particular is that when they're attacked by something, let's just say a fungus, they give off this chemical that are called phytoncides, and it's a chemical that helps to fight off whatever the invader is. And humans respond to that. We respond to that chemical as well. And so apparently these phytoncides, when we breathe them in, they do something similar within our bodies, helping to seek out, they call them killer cells, which I'm thinking, but I always have to use those words, but NK cells, natural killer cells, that this is one of the reasons, just to take a little bit of a historical perspective, that the Japanese got so into this was when in the 1980s, when Japan was making a concerted shift toward an industrialized society and moving out of the rural, forested, kind of agrarian society. The Japanese government, much to its credit, I'll have to say, noticed that there was an increase in certain kinds of diseases, autoimmune cancers, and so on. And so they kind of went, oh, we used to spend a lot of time outdoors and in the forest, and now we're in buildings, sitting at computers. Maybe we go back to the forest; things will get better. And so that was what started this practice, was them doing this research about how humans respond in nature. So that's a piece of it, is the phytoncide piece. And I do notice that, not that I'm curing any diseases by being in the forest, but there's a definite shift in my perspective the longer I spend around trees. Just a definite kind of like, oh yeah, this feels right. This is where I should be. And I think because I pay attention to them, trees are amazing. They're amazing. They are amazing creatures. I spend a lot of time, believe it or not, walking the campus at Riverbend. Riverbend Hospital intentionally did not cut down many of its old growth trees, and there are some really huge old trees, on the hospital property, and they're big. And I'll go out there, and I think a memory that sticks in my mind is just going out to this tree and just noticing this whole sort of colony, these little teeny tiny yellow spiders that were living in this tree, and how the tree and the spiders are like, yeah, we're good. We get along, so we can learn a lot from that too. We're so much like this. And I also always learn how trees they just sort of bend with the wind. They're not bothered by the rain or and if the lightning hurts one of them, they just kind of go with it, and yet the life springs forth from it again. So I think there's just a lot of lessons to learn from being in the forest. And it's not all perfect. I mean, there's scary things. We have to acknowledge that too. There's dangers, which is probably why so many of us our human life evolved towards cities and protection and walls and homes, and so there is that piece of it. But where's the balance, I guess? Where's the middle way? So I hope that answered your question. And you were on an early version of a forest walk with me up at and so I think, have you been too? Yeah, there's been several people. God, if I could just, my 65-year-old brain doesn't want to engage very well this morning, so. Okay. Anything else?
Anyu?
Yeah.
When it's called forest bathing.
Correct.
And you just spoke about the importance of trees.
Yes.
With that, and but then noticing the larger than human world.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's desert bathing.
Oh yeah. Any kind of now. I mean, absolutely. They it's called forest bathing, but it doesn't have to be in the forest. You can do it in your home, honestly, in kind of a, interest, like what's like noticing, like what's around me, how's my, what is in my home? Because I personally, being just a little bit of a space cadet in certain ways, I was like, oh, I never noticed that before, so can help with certain things. But yeah, you can do it really anywhere that the best place, of course, is outdoors. But I've done it here in the backyard at the temple here, so which is actually very lovely. It's very lovely to do it in the temple. Yeah, and I do it at Mount Pisgah now because there's a lot of variety there. There's a lot of places for people to go. But I've done it up at, I think, when Joichi, yeah, Blanton Ridge, yeah, the Blanton Ridge Trail. I've done it up there. Yeah.
Even up behind the center there, up on this ridge.
Oh yeah, exactly. There's that little.
Up there and found, amazing little.
There's that weird little trail, and when I walk around this neighborhood, I just live a couple of blocks from here, so I walk around this neighborhood a lot. And if you go up Cleveland Street, before you get to the very top, there's a little cut through. It's very short, maybe, I don't know, quarter of a mile or less. Just goes through the woods, and it's a nice. And sometimes there's a lot of deer in there, and people have cut down some trees, and done a few. I don't know who owns that property, but I walk through there all the time. It's a nice little. It's a very short but very nice little walk. Sometimes in the winter, there's a stream running through there. So, and I don't know where it probably comes out. Well, it comes out on the top of 25th. That's where I end. When I go through there, I come out the top of 25th. So I don't know. It's a nice little walk. Yeah.
There is something about trees specifically that is good for your immune system. So
Yeah.
it isn't the same
Yeah.
as just being in the house.
Yeah. Okay. Good point.
But, I remember, and I told you that I did this paper in nursing school.
That's right. That's right.
About forest bathing, and it was such an odd thing to do it about, so I kind of.
Yeah. I forgot about that. Thank you so much for reminding me. Yeah.
When I worked for Providence, we had this little facility that I worked at with this very odd place with patients that were really life sequestered. They had both dementia and his mental issues. Really bizarre, but interesting in character, but bizarre.
Yeah.
And I remember having this dream about them that they really needed to go out into the woods and forest. And the dream stayed with me, so that was the reason that I did the paper. I love trees. I have trees.
Yeah. No, I'm really glad you reminded me of that, because it reminded me of two things. One is that my grandmother, when I was little, as a very young child, I lived in Alabama. And we had our backyard was filled with pine trees, and so when my grandmother came to visit, she'd always say, "It's healthy to live among pines." so I just always remember this. I thought, she was right. But the other thing is that a lot of times when I'm working in the inpatient psych unit at the hospital, at University District Hospital, after talking with patients for a while, I'll take them outside and say, sit out here. There's some very nice plants here. Feel the air. Take a deep breath in. Yes, I know it's noisy with cars and all that kind of stuff, but really try to notice being, the outside. And people will say, "Oh, I just want to go sit with the tree." I'm like, "Yeah, go for it. Do it." Sounds like a great idea.
Last night or yesterday, I went to Sunset View. Person walking off to the beach with a friend. A lot of people are talking about business and
I know.
Really pissed me off for some reason. It's like coming all the way over here. Are you even talking about your own self-interest or like business work? It's a weekend, first of all, and second, you're all ears.
I know. It's interesting. I think I remember there was a story about it might have been in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. I don't remember where exactly I read it, but it was Suzuki Roshi is talking about a businessman who came to sit at the temple, and because he wanted to figure out his business problems. And then after a couple of months, he left, and so they think, "Oh, I guess he figured them out." Yeah. So it's interesting. We're so caught up in that world.
So one thing that I learned several years ago was about a bacteria that lives just under the surface of the soil. It's
Mhm.
releases it. Or when you're gardening,
Mhm.
you disturb the soil, it releases. We breathe it, and it releases endorphins in the human brain. Duh,
Yeah.
why did agriculture happen? Because somebody noticed that
Somebody noticed that.
they were
Okay.
digging.
Well, yeah, and I've heard that, and that's probably the same thing about having your hands in the dirt is essentially a natural antidepressant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Natural antidepressant.
I mean,
A little sign in my garden that says gardening is cheaper than therapy and you get tomatoes.
I love it. So we're about at time. Oh, go ahead, Satoko. Go ahead.
Oh, I just appreciate you sharing that.
Oh, of course.
I walk in a park,
Mhm.
different parks, and then so there's a particular park that I go to, and then I have one tree, and his name is Gensan.
Aww.
I go there and I would say good morning, Gensan.
Yeah. You know, my sister does the same thing. My sister.
Yeah,
Yeah, no. I'm just saying she has. There's like a little group of trees in Central Park in New York where she lives that she always says good morning to when she goes walking there, and she has names for them. And I love for her. I love that the fact that these trees are old and kind of bent and kind of twisted, and they're not like they're not like quote unquote perfect trees. They're just like us. You know, they have the broken branches and.
there was a program about the forest, and I don't remember exactly. It was a Japanese program about forest,
Mhm.
and so one person, she is an expert of the trees and forests, and so she said in order to get to know the nature, you want to get to know a tree first,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then you get to know more.
Yeah.
So it stuck with me.
Oh, yeah. That's lovely.
Say good morning to Gensan.
That's so sweet. I love that. Just was flashed on there's a few volunteer trees in my yard. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with them. There's a Doug fir that's growing up like right by the patio. I'm kind of like, what are we going to do with this? It might take a while. It might destroy the patio. I don't know. Or we might move it somewhere. Okay, so I appreciate everybody coming and listening. But I'm going to close with this poem that I just learned from or heard about from a friend on Friday at work. And it's by a poet named Fred Lamott. I'd never heard of him before. But it really kind of speaks to what we're getting at in forest bathing. My ancestry DNA results came in. Just as I suspected, my great-great-grandfather was a monarch butterfly. Much of who I am is still wriggling under a stone. I am part larva, but part hummingbird too. There is dinosaur tar in my bone marrow. My golden hair sprang out of a meadow in Palestine. Genghis Khan is my fourth cousin, but I didn't get his dimples. My loins are loaded with banyan seeds from Sri Lanka, but I descended from Ravana, not Ram. My uncle is a mastodon. There are traces of white people in my saliva. 3.7 billion years ago, I swirled in golden dust, dreaming of a planet overgrown with lingams and yonis. More recently, say 60,000 BC, I walked on hairy paws across the land bridge, joining Sweden to Botswana. I am the bastard of the sun and the moon. I can no longer hide my heritage of raindrops and cougar scat. I am made of your grandmother's tears. You conquered rival tribesmen of your own color, chained them together, marched them naked to the coast, and sold them to colonials from Savannah. I was that brother you sold. I was the slave trader. I was the chain. Admit it. You have wings vast and golden, like mine, like mine. You have sweat, black and salty, like mine, like mine. You have secrets silently singing in your blood, like mine, like mine. Don't pretend that Earth is not one family. Don't pretend we never hung from the same branch. Don't pretend we don't ripen on each other's breath. Don't pretend we didn't come here to forgive. Cougar scat. Buddha